Jason Taylor, man, what's going on?
What's going on, Joe? How you doing?
Good, good. I think the only time I see you is either on LinkedIn when you're on our show, leaving lots of comments, but you show up as a LinkedIn user on Streamyard, so it's always a running joke with us. But you're also really good friends with two of my best friends, Chris Tabb and Matt Housley. So a friend of them is a friend of mine. So
We're all friends, especially at the pub.
yeah, which pub do you guys go to?
Chris has a particular, actually, hotel bar that he really
Oh,
likes. Yeah, I think it's from obviously him traveling back and forth across the pond. They're very nice to us there, and it's relatively quiet, and we can talk about things or work for that matter.
oh,
So that's kind of nice. Otherwise, I know I drag him downtown. We've been going to Blind Tiger occasionally. If you remember.
downtown. And where do you guys live, in Jersey or in
Um,
Manhattan?
I'm in Manhattan. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, yeah,
So downtown, so Blind Tiger is like a craft beer bar. I don't know. I'm into
got it.
craft beer. So,
I like
yeah,
craft beer. So uh, New York's got, yeah, it's a fun place. And I think what is it? There's also the Loki Happy Hour. That's always a lot of fun. I think coming up on this is a 1 year anniversary. Actually, I think that today, I believe.
today's the 1 year anniversary. Oh, now I feel worse since I can't go.
Well, it is what
Next
it
time.
is. Yeah, I mean, you've been to enough of them. I mean, they're a good event. I think I went to the second one in September, and that was a lot of fun. So, but it was
Yeah,
back when it was just like at Flannery's for the audience. It's the bar where Ethan Aaron hosts his low key happy hours, and it's definitely it's a bit of a dive. I'll call it that. It's kind of a towny bar.
it is a dive. It's not
Yeah,
a dive. It's a dive.
it's a dive. I mean, we'll be fair. It's a
Yeah,
dive, but it's very fitting. So
it's a good place, and it's very like unassuming. I think my favorite part is I'm most people consider me relatively extroverted,
hmm.
and I also consider myself extroverted, but like I'm not somewhat comically shy, especially in some of those situations. So like I actually really like the low key happy hour because people just kind of come up and talk, and they're like, "Hey, what do you do?" And I'm like, "This is great. I don't have to do anything. I can just kind of stand here and order beers, and people will come up and we
Oh,
can
that's cool.
chat." Yeah,
Oh, that's perfect.
yeah,
Do no work. It's yeah. I felt the crowd was really awesome, really receptive, and yeah, it's super fun. I think back then it was really small, so I think who was it? Ethan, Lauren, Scott, Bright, and a few other people. We closed down the bar that night, but no, it's
that is
fun. But it's good to see it evolving. What's also cool is seeing that the low key idea is like taken off around the world. So I mean, I've been to several low key happy hours around the planet, and it's cool. But what I like about it is there's no vendors, right? So
there are vendors. They're like incognito and not actually trying to sell you things.
yeah, yeah. But I mean, it's not like I guess
Yeah.
some of these events you feel like you're going to a timeshare meeting, right? Like you have to suffer through the presentation and all that bullshit.
Sit
So
here for an hour, and I will give you an hour free in your favorite destination.
yeah, yeah. It's coming out of COVID, I just don't think that's what people want. I mean, we're out of it, clearly out of it now, but it's like still, I think people really just appreciate genuine, like human to human connections, and you appreciate people just coming up to you and introducing themselves. So it
Oh,
works out really well.
I used to also go to like my we talked about this more, but like
Yeah,
my background was quant finance, and I used to go to a lot of the quant conferences because I wanted to like kind of like data conferences. I wanted to like go and hear these methodologies and what people are working on and that kind of stuff. And there's so many that it was just like you walk in and it's like, here's my tool, here's what my tool does. Look at this chart that
yeah.
goes up to the right, and amazing, and you should buy it. And it's
Sorry, there's like a weird noise coming from your computer. I'm not sure what that is. It sounds like a cat in a
fine.
box or something.
Yes, I actually secretly have a cat over here in a box that's
Okay, no worries. Yeah, we can. But yeah. So you're talking about another place then?
uh no, I was just I was at I used to go to a bunch of these conferences, and
Yeah.
they used to just have just people pitching their products the whole time, and it was just terrible. Like I don't I'm genuinely curious if there is an audience of people out there. Like I guess people go to some of those just to network, but like do people really get anything out of just sitting through like product pitch after product pitch for half a day.
I'm sure there's some people like that, right? I mean, there's everyone's got a weird fetish for something in this world, so I'm sure there's people that just love being pitched to relentlessly for hours on end. And probably those same people, they like walking around conferences and getting all the swag. And I think there was an Office episode actually where Michael Scott goes to a conference and he gets all the swag. Yeah. His whole apartment is full of swag. So I mean, there's probably people like that, right? Like I said, the only thing I've realized is that there's, for everything you think that's weird, there's somebody out there who's probably way into it. So
that is a very valid point. That's a very valid point.
Yeah.
Community.
It is like so I ran meetups for a long time, and there were some people, and I would go to other meetups, right? And there's some people there who were like at every single meetup, every meetup I ever go to, and I used to go to a lot, but there's this one guy in particular who he's a good friend of mine, but I was like, I think he goes to meetups just so he can get dinner. Like he eats pizza every night. So,
I mean, I guess that works. Is he at least contributing to the meetup, or is he
he's an awesome guy. Yeah, he's good things to say. But I was like, you go to a lot of meetups for sure. Like I think your entire life is spent at meetups. So yeah, who knows? There's probably people that love to go to the vendor pitches, and I'd be curious if there's people that only want to go to vendor pitches and like that's the only thing they want. They don't want to engage in anything else. Just like, I guess if you're an industry analyst, right, that might be one thing where you want to go hear the pitches. So
yeah, I could see. There's probably angles there that we're missing.
Other
than the people that just frankly make money from conferences.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. I was relatively inactive on both LinkedIn, since you see me on LinkedIn a decent amount now.
I would be surprised. You were inactive on there for a while.
Yeah. So it was a very long time where, I mean, frankly, is like early, before COVID and even before that, right? Like where it just, I don't know, I'm not a big social media person. And I like try to meet people out in the world and, at a bar and things like that. And then, between COVID and, I could talk a little bit about like my career path is everything in our space is totally different. But like I guess I didn't really start meeting and talking to people in our space up until like the past couple of years. And it's actually really nice. I love talking shop. I could talk shop we could do a podcast for the rest of the day for all I care. Like I could talk shop for a long time. I mean, especially I might have to go to the bar and then take you with me, but like, I could talk shop for a long time. And yeah, it's actually really nice to kind of embrace the community and talk about ideas and kind of,
What was that switch for you though, right? Because you weren't on social media very much. Now you're very active on LinkedIn. To be fair, I was the same way. I think COVID, I just didn't really care about LinkedIn before. I was like, but I think what changed with it is it became more like Facebook in a weird way, but all the good parts of Facebook, or most of the good ones, and not the, your crazy uncle ranting about MAGA and stuff on there. You still get a few of those types of people too, but they're easy to ignore. So
yes, and LinkedIn gives you wonderful buttons to block and remove and unhide. I know you and I have shared that common, like if you lob me a kind of a cold call over LinkedIn, it's like no.
Oh yeah. And so for the audience out there, if you're listening, there's a certain workflow that maybe Jason and I have where if your first message out of the gate is a sales pitch, right? So I don't know about you, Jason, but for me, I will the connection gets removed because you can't message me unless we're connections. And then the other thing is that your message gets moved to other, which I don't know if you've ever seen the other thing, but it's like purgatory for messages. Like
it's pretty bad, and it's kind of unfortunate because sometimes the other, to your point, like if I didn't know you and I wanted to get in contact with you somehow, I'd have to use LinkedIn Mail or whatever that is, and some of that's paid, and and I'd have to lob you this message that goes into your effective spam, right? Mm-hmm. Which you never read, and it's like impossible. So it's kind of unfortunate. Like the people that are, I'm sure this works for some people, but I think that the people that are arguably using LinkedIn as a sales platform, like, are kind of ruining it for the rest of us a little bit, which, because there's a large majority of us who just don't want to deal with it. I mean, low-key happy hour is a living, breathing version of that, essentially, which is don't come sell to me. Like I'll happily talk about what you're living and breathing, but
yeah, Yeah, I mean, it is very gratuitous, though. I think, especially when the messages aren't targeted towards your particular vertical at
Oh
all.
yeah,
It's like, hey, have you thought about becoming a real estate agent, Jason? I'm just like, probably when I was like 20, but certainly not today, and certainly not from you. No, it's interesting, and I mean, and I feel kind of bad in some ways because it's just these people's job, but I
totally.
mean, you and I have things to do too, and we got our own jobs. And as I tell people, like, your problem ain't my problem. Don't make your problem my problem. So um, if you can't sell stuff, then maybe figure out a different approach. It's kind of why you're paid the big bucks if you can make a quota, right? Ideally, so it's not that's just life in the big city. It's just figure
Yeah.
out a different way to do it.
I
So
also think that, like, especially from at least my perspective on selling, is I frankly, I think I'm kind of more interested in the connection and the relationship,
yeah,
right? So if I was trying to sell you theoretically, right, like I could message you, we could talk, I'd learn more about you. If there's a fit, maybe I'll start plugging my product, and if there isn't, then I won't. And
yeah.
that's we came away with that relationship, and we can.
That's tasteful, right? Because it's at least you're kind of getting another person's problems and
Yeah.
whatnot. Yeah, and I feel like it's interesting. I mean, you and I run companies, and we have to sell. I mean, that's sort of the name of the game. But the approach I've always taken is just you know build a relationship over time, build the trust, and if there's a fit. And the other thing is with sales, it's like it's a matter of that timing intersecting with the need.
Yeah,
It
totally.
may not be today may not be the right day. Next year may be the time when it makes sense. But if you have that good relationship, then things, sort of the sine waves intersect at some point. But you really can't force a good deal. I don't think. Or it's really hard to.
Yeah,
So
it's very difficult, and then and then you cause strain on your relationship and strain on the deal, and it's just there's a whole bunch of negative things that come out of that.
yeah, yeah. But that's interesting though. I mean, so I mean, I know you through a social, and I guess maybe we'll just keep talking about that part when we talk shop, whatever. But um, yeah, I mean, what are you getting out of social media these days? You're back on LinkedIn, and I'm just curious. I mean, I spend a lot of time there these days, obviously, and I'm always curious what people try and get out of it. It's
Yeah, I think that there's a couple things. One, it's uh, kind of my discovery zone, right? Like I'm perusing LinkedIn for new products, new ideas, new people, like that kind of area. Like, I think that's the majority of what I'm there for. Other than that, like some of it's news, some of it's like this company bought this company and so on and so forth. But a lot of it's just, yeah, I'm looking for new ideas,
mm,
new thoughts, that kind of stuff. So like, I think, I mean, like, I obviously listen and watch your shows, so like I think those are good. I watch, data engineering podcasts and
mm,
things like that. So like I try to listen to some of those, and I again I didn't always do that, but I find that most of the time I spend on LinkedIn, it's just like, who's this new company? What are they about? Who works there? Um, kind of what's their perspective on this new thing in the world,
mm.
right? Um, so it's just I don't know. It feels like your finger on the pulse a little bit,
Yeah,
uh, right?
it gets you out of your comfort zone for sure. And I think it's a double-edged sword, right? 'Cause social media is one of these things where I think it's sort of a self-fulfilling filter bubble in some ways if you're not trying to get outside of it intentionally,
Yeah,
right? So you get because I mean the algorithm will simply just keep recommending people and content that you engage with. It's every social media platform, and you know, um, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I always listen to different podcasts too to sort of get different ideas on things, and sometimes a lot of software engineering podcasts I listen to as well, just because I feel like that's more of the barometer of kind of again. I always talk about software seems like it's farther ahead than data, and I always feel like if you can understand what's going on there, then you kind of have a good idea of where data might be going. But
well,
yeah,
there's an interesting thing I think related to that, which is just, and I've seen it time and again that so I come from financial services. We can talk more about that.
yeah,
But the vast majority of the time I see people hiring data engineers or people related to that, they typically want software engineers that have
mm,
some exposure to data, right? It's like, oh, I want, you have to have a CS background and, spent this much time developing applications, but, we want you to understand financial data. And it's like, okay, well, those are interesting combinations of skills and or attributes or experiences that, I'm curious why you want that person versus advertising for a data engineer, even
Mm.
if data engineer title of a role. So that's why I feel it's really interesting, especially as our space evolves, right? And you were talking about how software is kind of ahead, so we're adapting all these things into our space. Um, there's a separate point here, which is like our space is actually really, really big, and I'm always interested or curious about the divides within our space, right? Like, because there's a veritable divide I see, and I mean, you're around more than I am. I'm curious if you see this between there's like the whole data engineering, data architecture world, and then there's like data governance and stewardship and like
Hmm.
and that stuff. I feel like those are separate worlds. Do you see that or
I think to some degree, yeah. Actually, I'm taking a note on that real quick. It's pretty cool. It is. I think that there's how do I articulate this? There are definitely divides, and I feel like kind of generational divides in some ways too.
total?
Like I because of the podcasts I do, I do have relationships with, I would say, a lot of people, in different spheres of data, data scientists, analysts, data governance, data management people. And, I was recently on a Malcolm Hawker's podcast, and he's, it's all about governance management, that kind of, that's, I consider more in that area. And, but, I kind of, if you kind of zoom out, I feel like these are all sort of, they're all interconnected, obviously, right? And I think we're all trying to get towards the same goal, which is, quote, getting more value from your data, which is just a phrase that's been beat to death. I was saying earlier this week, I keep hearing that. I'm probably going to go jump off a bridge or something. It's just, it drives me insane.
Well, I love Scott's data is a new bullshit. I was listening to that and I was like, that's
Yeah. Yeah, he's good, and I put him more kind of in the data management space, right? Because he's an MDM keynote speaker and selling the data, um, literally data for a long time, actually, right? He came from Nielsen and a few other companies like that. So, but it's at the end of the day, we're all trying to do the same thing,
yeah, yep,
right?
totally.
But there
And
are
we all
definitely factions for sure. It's kind of like, I guess, if you kind of equate music to something, as a genre that people will like and listen to, and it makes them happy or angry or whatever. But there's different genres of music. You got country, you got, metal, hip hop, and whatever. I feel like that's kind of what these divides are, maybe, where they serve different functions. They have different groups and tribes that like them. But at the end of the day, music is there to entertain, and I think data is there to, provide some semblance of moving the needle forward for businesses, ideally, or moving the needle forward for society, maybe. Kind of zoom out on that.
very
So,
altruistic.
well, I mean, because you might be doing data for like a nonprofit, or like climate change or something like that, where that I don't know if that's really industry specific, but yeah, but it is interesting. I think you bring up a very fascinating observation. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on this?
I, I think that I mean, we started talking about this a little bit. Like, data engineering evolved from software engineering, right? Like, for
Hmm.
better or for worse. I think that if we kind of follow back to that point, there was a group of people before data engineering, when it was only software engineers, that said, "Hey, there's some data stuff going on here, and we need to figure out policies and all that stuff around it." And I feel like I'm relatively young. I won't date myself on the show, but I feel like there's people, Scott and whatnot, that were around in those times, and Bill Inman and all these other people that are. I mean, Bill's probably more technical than that group, but there's a whole
He
group
is.
of people that got to this point where they were um, more focused on the governance, more focused on policy, and that sort of thing. And I think that that group has continued to sustain itself and go on through time. And the software engineer turned into data engineer and continued to evolve forward. So now we have this one faction that's been here for forever to some degree, and then we have the other faction that's evolved and kind of is slowly moving. I don't know, in a parallel related direction. I don't that's just kind of me reflecting on where it came from. I think that I mean, you'd made this point somewhere else, and I frankly agree with it. There's a bit here which is like data engineers should learn data modeling, right? And data governance people should learn data engineering. And I don't mean that from the learn to code so much as I mean like learn the building blocks and
Yeah.
learn the undercurrents and the things like that, right?
Hmm.
Like a toss of the book. Um,
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I've been ranting on this a bit. I kind of take the not kind of. I'm taking the approach that we need to be a lot more holistic in our thought process and how we view things, right? I think it's funny because we talk about how the business operates in silos, and I think you bring up a really good point where we also, as an industry, operate in our silos. And you need to step out and get the perspectives. I think that'll make you a better data practitioner in general, right? If you only look at things through the data governance lens, for example, you ignore all the other aspects of things, all the other practices people are doing. I mean, do you truly think you're going to be that effective? Because I can tell you the batting average for data governance initiatives, for example, is pretty abysmal.
yes.
So, but if you think you can keep doing the same stuff, and expecting different results, I mean,
Isn't that the definition of insanity?
yeah, I was gonna say there's famous quotes about that. Yeah, you know, but that's the industry though too. I see that overwhelmingly where it's like, oh, we got to look at it through the data governance lens, and that's what matters at the end of the day. But again, I'm trying to look at it more through like I equate it to mixed martial arts, like know all the techniques, know all the disciplines, and know when to use them and what the trade offs are when you want to use them and when you don't want to use them. Like I don't see anything wrong with that.
No.
So.
No. Yeah, more awareness, more I don't know, just knowledge of what's out there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I'll tie this back to a little bit of where I came from because I think there's an
Yeah.
interesting point of what I've experienced. So my career actually started at a financial data company called FactSet, which is typically people associate them with Bloomberg and S&P and what used to be Thomson Reuters now is Refinitiv. Um, so there's these big companies that also data to financial companies and platforms as well, and then there's a zillion, and I'll shout out to Dan Entrup who has a map of all these companies now, because mapping is the new podcast.
Oh.
So he has a market map of all the data providers out there, and so I started my career there, actually owning a content set or a couple content sets. So we can come back to this.
What's a
And then,
content set?
yeah,
Just
so
very
like,
briefly.
when I say content set, I'm really talking about like a data set. So like I'll give you a direct example. So I owned credit ratings
Okay.
and data when I was at FactSet. So what that means is that there were several providers of credit ratings, and they provided data feeds, and
Got
it
it.
was my job to help spec out, uh, in some cases, what the new feeds were, so that an engineer could build it out for me, and how those data sets would then feed into the platform and what kind of call it rudimentary semantic layer I needed to like kind of feed it different places. So I goofingly refer to that as like I was kind of a data product manager at that time because that's really what that is.
Interesting. Yeah.
And then let's see, from there I went client facing, and did kind of like quant and data feed, kind of like sales and solutions and all that kind of stuff. Jumped to the buy side after that, which means I was at a fund as a quant. Quant is very, I laugh because quant to me feels like data scientists from a role perspective, where
Oh,
it just
totally.
it means
Yeah.
stuff and things with computers and numbers, right? And it's just like, so there's that, and then at some point around there, I actually took a veritable turn because I always wanted to be a quant. Being a quant's actually really hard. Like I don't have a PhD, right? Just openly,
Yeah.
like I have a CFA and all this other stuff, which is just
It's still hard
lots
to
of
get though. CFA's
super hard.
not easy, dude.
Yeah, lots of time I could have spent doing other things in my life. But yeah, I did my CFA and my FRM, which were both, I mean, good experiences. Like my background's not in finance, and I wanted to learn more about it. So that was the way
That's
I
cool.
approached it.
God, you're morbid. That's crazy.
Very very self-deprecating, masochistic, all the good traits of a good data person. So Yeah, at some point, like, quant was just, I was fighting uphill against these people with PhDs, and I'm like, all right, like, well, like, I can keep doing this and I genuinely enjoy it, or like data's been kind of the common thread, and I had an opportunity to go work at the startup, which was essentially data engineering for financial services.
Interesting.
I joined that company as the first solutions engineer, kind of laid the groundwork, brought in some more people, and then got yanked over into data engineering. And I've never had a data engineering title. I just, like, I had the fortunate backstory where I'd been the guy at the company managing the data feeds, and I was also the guy selling it, and then I was also the guy who was buying it and consuming it and using it. So it's like I'd seen kind of all the sides of how that worked. Um, so because of that, I understood how the data feeds worked, and frankly where they broke and where, people didn't realize they were breaking and things
Right.
like that. So I ended up building out the data engineering team, which at that company meant we were doing much like I described at FactSet, which is, I go and we get a new data feed from, I don't know, pick your favorite data vendor. And, they give me a spec. That spec is in any number of different formats. It could be a PDF, it could be a Word doc. Someone could have written it down for all I know. And then all the files are completely different and so on and so forth. And uh, yeah, we had to just build out a lot of those. And our first client that we signed was Two Sigma, which is like a giant behemoth tech powerhouse. And you're like, what? And
Interesting.
they frankly, they saw the problem the same way we did, which was that, similar to ETL, right? Like everybody's out there building the same Salesforce connector, right? Like financial services is the same dance, right? Everyone's out there building the same way of ingesting FactSet data, right? And now these data marketplaces are making it easier, so I can like just go to Snowflake and grab the data, and no big deal.
Right.
It also that also kind of assumes that you trust the data vendors to push all this data to the place,
Mm.
and right, like how do you trust that? How do you audit that? How do you understand that they didn't go and change things and not tell you? And when you've got millions, billions, trillions on the line, like I don't trust anybody.
Right.
And I always make food analogies, right? Like, and this applies all over the place to our divides to other things, but like I think the food analogy is like, you know, uh, in finance especially, we can't trust anybody else. So I grow all my own vegetables, and I raise my own cattle, and I know how they're fed, and so on and so forth. And if I want to cook a meal, like I know where everything came from, and I know how it got there, and I know who touched it, and so on and so forth, right? And there's practicalities to that, right? Like I can't. I'm not standing there on the stock floor like reading off ticker prices and phoning them home, right?
Right.
Like there, there's more practical things there. Like I can't do everything, but yeah, I mean that was the challenge. We ended up building out zillions of pipelines, and more practical numbers like tens to hundreds of thousands, right? Like just lots. And
Yeah.
when I say pipelines, just for context, a pipeline was like an individual like file pattern with certain schema, so on and so forth. So like some of these data products that you'd buy, um, I don't know if I can name names offhand, but
Yeah. You
like
don't
some,
need to.
yeah, I'm thinking
Yeah.
data products you could buy, like I might spend tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars a year on this data product, and it would have maybe tens or hundreds of thousands of individual components that I needed to keep track of, which is just it's a lot. So I'll relate this back to kind of why I kind of started down here, and I can tell you where I went after that company. But uh, I I for a long time, when I thought about data, I thought about the industry I was in, which is finance, and specifically asset management, right? Like, because there's banking, and banking has their own internal data, who has accounts, who stores money there. But there's a separate bit of this, which is in asset management, the whole industry is entirely dependent on data that you buy or purchase from somewhere else, right? Even like a Bloomberg terminal, like that's not data I have inside. So it was really interesting to me, especially on social media, when I came into the data community and everyone's talking about, oh, I hate piping data from finance to marketing to sales. And I'm like,
Hmm.
well, shit, I wasn't even thinking about that. I was thinking more of like I needed to get this stuff from outside my organization in and manage it, because I can't, our business ceases to exist if we don't have it. Um, it's kind of an interesting
Yeah.
paradigm kind of shift from thinking about like internal data engineering and that dynamic versus the outside world and that dynamic. But financial services have been doing this forever. I mean, like,
Right.
again, the industry runs on data from other people, which is a completely different shift from the if you think about even like data contracts, right? Like I
Mm.
have a very literal commercial contract with SLAs and all this delivery stuff, and like and the people that I'm paying don't even necessarily uphold those, or
Right.
and so it's kind of a completely different shift. Um,
Hmm. That's really interesting. Was that experience jarring when you first saw these differences here?
uh, no, I mean like it's arguably arguably obvious around the oh well I have sales and marketing and you're trying to combine data that way like it was just I think the more interesting point there was just how uh, different groups of people with the same role have such different focuses, right? Like it's one thing to jump from like industry to industry and we're still piping things from marketing to sales, whatnot. But like it's another thing when you're jumping, I don't know, healthcare to real estate, right? As an
Yeah.
arbitrary, like such different considerations, such different motions in terms of both data flow and what we care about and like how sensitive things are, right? I also come from a world where like your pipeline can't go down as much as humanly possible, and I was at other places where they're like, yeah, sure, make the change in prod, and the usual joke of, yeah, I test all my stuff in prod,
Yeah.
Um,
That's funny.
yeah, I just they're very different. I mean, somewhat of an obvious statement. Different industries, different perspectives, so on and so forth.
Hmm.
But like, it's like a completely different modality to some degree between I feel like standard business and finance to some end.
Mm. That's really interesting. And then I guess what are you doing these days?
Oh yeah. So after I left that company, I jumped. I spent some time at Palantir, which we can talk about. Palantir is a cool spot.
Hmm.
And then now we have a company that's focused on data matching, right? Like
Okay.
it was really interesting, and like I'm not gonna, I don't like selling. Like I want to sell naturally versus like this. Like here's my advertisement on the podcast. Uh, no, there's a really interesting thing here, which is like entity resolution's a 50, 60-year-old problem. It's
Yeah.
not even remotely new. And there's plenty of statisticians and especially in public sector jobs that have been doing this probably longer than I've been alive. And um, I think the thing that we find interesting is that consistently people still struggle to join data, right? And it's still, I don't know, it's kind of it's just interesting to think about the fact of like how much has that really evolved short of like
Mm.
before we used Levenstein and now we use some reinforcement learning model, and it's like, okay, well, still kind of doing the same thing.
Right.
um so yeah, and we're actually, the way we look at it is, look, like the methodology is going to keep changing, right? The models are never perfect,
Hmm.
and there's this whole apparatus around that exercise that you need to think about, right? Like it's almost like data pipelines as well, right? Like there's more than just move thing from A to B, right? And similarly in matching, there's more to matching than just link record A with record A in this other place. Like it's more like, okay, like how do I manage that process, and what are the teams involved, and what's their workflow, and and this is where I'm gonna go back to organizational dynamics that I
Right.
always go back to. And um yeah, I mean, someone very wise once said to me, he's not that much older than me either, but he said, people process tools. And it's a very like MBA-esque phrase, but uh, I struggle to find places where that doesn't apply.
Same.
Yeah. And and I know I ping you about some of these topics as well, because
Hmm.
it's just like uh it that phrase resonates so many times over, and it's like, and there's a lot of conversation around now about like, how people are obsessed with tooling and only on tooling, and we're spending a lot of time on tooling, and it's like, okay, well, I don't hear anybody talking about process, not that often.
Hmm.
A lot of people talk about people, right? And I think that there's definitely some disconnect because you want to go up and down that chain a little bit.
Hmm.
Um, Going on a little bit of a rant, but
Well, that's what the podcast is for, though, right? So, no, it's an interesting one. I think I wrote about that in one of my recent blog posts. It's definitely not a tooling problem at this point. I don't think people. I don't know, but I call it practices too. Maybe that's process, maybe it's not. But I definitely made the argument that I think one of the biggest issues that we face as an industry is just a lack of standardized training and knowledge and skills.
yeah,
Um, so what it means is even though you have some of the most fantastic tools in the universe at this point, you're failing to, I think, leverage the full capabilities. In a lot of cases, actually probably working against these great tools and working backwards in some ways, right? So I can't say it's not a tooling discussion at this point.
yeah, but tools are sexy, tools are fun, shiny.
Well, it's what
Everybody
people want to sell too. They want to sell you tools. They're not
totally.
going to sell you. They can also sell you people. I guess the recruiter, a person like me could sell you practices if you buy my book, right? But
Or
that's a
consultant.
lot of work to read that.
Yeah, consultants
So
sell kind of processes sometimes if you buy
yeah,
what they're selling.
hmm
And
but
you
only
guys,
if you buy what they're selling, though. If you don't, then you can't get it. So
yeah,
you'll just
yeah,
fail. You'll fail miserably. I'm
yeah.
joking, but
But no, it's very interesting, and it's very I feel like seldomly people think about it in that context, and then kind of like it's like, okay, well, let's start at the bottom. Like, let's look at the tools. It's like, okay, well, are the tools working for us? No. It's like, okay, let's go the next step up. It's like, is the process working? It's like, no, the process isn't working. We're like, oh, great. It's like, okay, let's go one more step up from that. It's like, do we have the people that we trust and believe that can do this? And it's like, oh, yes, we do. It's like, oh, okay, well then probably should go fix the process, right? Like, and kind of start there and start simple, and
yeah,
don't just try and automate everything out of the box.
yeah, it's interesting. And I guess with like financial services though was an interesting one, right? Because I feel like that's an area where data has always been somewhat of a first class citizen.
Yep.
In a former life, I was actually choosing between being a quant and being an actuary, and then I chose
Wow.
to be neither. Actually, yeah, I think
Wise choice.
probably. I mean, but this is in the early 2000s. I was taking a lot of financial math classes and
Yep.
studying fun stuff like martingales, I think they were, and other fun things. So I mean, it was getting pretty deep into it, but I don't know. I don't know why I didn't go. Probably should have gone. But I would have been in New York, I guess, and not here. But it's neither here nor there. But finance is definitely one of those areas where I feel like it's always been data intensive. I mean, so I'd say some of the biggest innovations in um, data technologies and practices have been in finance. They've always been doing this because you had to, right? I mean,
Yeah.
because the feedback loop is very quick, and the consequences are, I would say, pretty upside, and obviously, if you blow up, then not a good day for you either.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. But it's even though it's set up that way, um, the financial services industry has this MO of just doing things manually a lot of the times, right?
yeah,
Like throwing people at like I always think I was never a sell side banker or analyst or anything, but like a, a, a lot of the stereotype around that is, kids out of college, smart kids out of college
hmm
that, sit there and check numbers and do spreadsheets and stuff like that. And it's like,
right,
think about it, like that's quite literally a highly skilled, highly paid worker that's doing data quality
hmm
to recommend
yeah.
and crunch numbers, right? Like it's kind of interesting. Like financial services has consistently thrown people and like rudimentary processes as the first option
Why do you
every
think
time.
that is?
I think it's trust predominantly. If I were to take a
Hmm.
guess, um, like I have more faith that I can hire a person that is intelligent that will do the right thing and find the edge cases and know how to address them versus like if I write a process and I don't spend sufficient time coding all these things to handle all these cases, then I'm kind of screwed, right? Like I'm not gonna have Chat GPT build me something and fucking hallucinate halfway through, and then
Right.
then we're screwed. So yeah, I think it all comes down to consequences to what you were saying before, right? Like if we screw this up, we lose millions of dollars, billions of dollars, and I've seen, I have personally, I'm not going to say I'm not at fault for this, but I was part of a team where they were running money, and uh, I there were some scripts that were doing some of the analysis, and one day I said, "Oh, here's the script that's been running. That's part of the analysis. Let me go dig into it and see actually what's going on." And I quite thankfully caught something in that script that was stale data, and it was just something someone hard coded some data somewhere, and or hard coded like access to a file, not
Yeah.
like first. And it was like a couple weeks out of date, but we did the math and we like realized like, oh well, shit, well we probably lost like a couple $1 million, because
Ugh.
it was like this and nobody realized it. And thankfully we caught it then and not like a month or two later, and it could have been bigger pain, but like yeah, I mean like it was,
Jeez.
yeah, but again, like going back to the premise, like you'd be shocked at how many processes are so rudimentary in finance. You'd be shocked at how many things are just people um, in place. Yeah, like vast majority of the time, people rather build than buy. Like it's like I said, it's arguably the MO just in our field. Like people want control, people want trust. They don't trust anything that's not from inside the house, so to say. Um,
And it makes sense, right? It was interesting because in the book that Matt and I wrote, um, we definitely have the argument they should buy and not build, but we have the strong caveat that build when it's part of your core competence,
yep.
right? So if trust is part of the core of your company, then you should probably want to build around that, right? I mean, it'd be but in finance, though, I think you're absolutely right. It's something I think that goes unrecognized because it's not like other industries. The amount of trust and the amount of like ways things can probably go wrong, I would imagine, is pretty great. Again, with severe consequences. If you mess up, how are you going to get that money back?
Yeah, no, well, you're not, well,
Right.
unless you develop a better strategy, and then maybe you'll make more. But that's arguably doubling down when
Mm-hmm.
you have nothing. Yeah, it's you can't, and that's why the other thing is that I have a great appreciation for like the observability space, etc.
Mm.
Because like the whole tenet of lineage and traceability and all that kind of stuff is like I find it interesting that it's taken that long to become this popular, because
Mm.
it's like, why didn't you think that was important before? Because again, for us in financial services, it was just like you had to have it. You had to see where everything is, where it went, who touched what when. Like that was just, you needed that. And there are plenty of places that don't have it, and uh, Godspeed to them. I hope nothing ever happens. But yeah, I mean, you need that, and we're talking about all these ways in which financial services is somewhat antiquated, and at the same time, you made the point before, and I very much agree with that. They're also on the bleeding edge, right? Like they have to try new things to make more money and so on and so forth. So it's like, how do you operate in this world? Healthcare is kind of similar, right? Like I want to innovate as much as possible, but I don't want anybody to die, right?
Right.
Like how do you do that? And yeah, when I was at Palantir, I was actually on the government and kind of healthcare side of the company, which was very interesting.
Mm.
But it's like how do we innovate? How do we move fast? But also like, these are quite literally people's lives, at stake. So, how do you check and balance that whole process?
Right. Interesting observation about the observability space. I was talking with Igor over at Big Eye recently, and we had a good discussion. And his thinking, I think, is it's in terms of data stacks. I think it's very interesting, right? So he's talking about, I guess, what we call the traditional data stack, which is the non-modern data stack technologies. So the stuff that people were using probably before the modern data stack was a thing. right? But it seemed like observability really started sort of as a reaction to getting bad data into these like your snowflakes and whatever else, and then trying to trace back what happened. But he had a good point too, where it's you got to extend further than the footprint of the modern data stack to really do observability correctly, and I 1,000% agree with him. But I think, and we also talked about the notion of just bubbles. Like, if you're in the modern data stack filter bubble, that's sort of the lens you view the world through. But and so it's interesting because seeing observability become a thing. Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, there have been tools that have been doing lineage and this kind of stuff for ages. We had to buy the whole
Yep.
monolith to do it,
Yep.
but to become an official practice, I mean, I guess people had always been kind of doing observability or data quality checks, like maybe checking for
Somewhat.
nulls or value counts or something like that in a table, but just really crude operations. But for it to become a practice, I suppose, again, if you just kind of look where software engineering has been, you can sort of get an idea of where data is going. Is my old mantra. But yeah, it is fascinating. It took this long to figure it out, but yeah, I don't know.
Well, I think it's yeah, I think it's more that it took this long to become as popular as it is.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I think everybody had like arguably, well, I guess maybe more people in our space had like a collective giggle when Google came out with their paper saying, "Guys, quality, not quantity," and we're like, "No shit." Like, you don't say. Like, I think we all knew that for a long time, but thank you for letting us all know that this is important now. But like observability is interesting. I mean, like it's a software engineering paradigm. Like I'm no classically trained software engineer, but like when it started getting popular, I was really interested to like I I I have a lot of respect for Bar, but like I don't think that they came up with that term. And I know that she borrowed it as well, and she makes reference
Mhm.
to this. Like it's from software engineering, and and I was like, oh, cool. And I was I started trying to understand like, okay, what is this word? And oh,
Yeah.
it describes this thing that I've always kind of just thought about as lineage and audit and that kind of stuff. So
Well, yeah, then they had data reliability engineering, right? And it's just
it's more big
site
eye. Yeah.
reliability engineering. Yeah, so it's all the same kind of stuff. But I mean, kudos to everyone who's, I think, pushing it forward because it's a
Totally.
necessity, right? I mean, um, but it's I still feel like it's super early days. Again, going back to Igor, I think he bought a actually kind of a, I wouldn't say a legacy, but a very mature, very old data lineage company, and
Yeah.
but I think there's a good reason for that, just because
Oh,
they're plugging
totally.
into all the old systems, right? All the old systems everyone still uses and will continue to use until Kingdom Come, most likely.
Well, I definitely, and there are companies, including Big Eye now, that are doing this, but like especially when the observability trend first came out, I was kind of looking at it and I'm like, why are we talking about this only in the context of a data warehouse? Like
Yeah,
that makes no
I
sense.
felt the same way.
I'm
Yep.
like, I don't like this is literally a term describing observability like across your system. Like, why are we only focused on it in one place? And that's why especially as I got to know Kyle and Igor, like and talking to them, like we
Mhm.
talk about the same things. And then there's a lot of other companies that are trying to attack this problem. But yeah, I mean, it's super hard. I mean, to your point, like if I'm not on a modern data stack and don't follow certain paradigms, then like how do I build a tool that frankly observes through everything everywhere all at the same time, right? Like
Mhm.
wonderful movie, but yeah, like it's crazy. And I think that movie's probably a appropriate representation just given how chaotic it could be jumping from tool to tool.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating to see where it all goes. Like I said, I mean, I think I feel like the discussion of the modern data stack really needs to sort of be put to. I think we've seen to move beyond it at this point. We're talking about it for ages right now, and I feel like it's great. It's here. We don't need to keep praising it or hating on it. It just sort of is what it is. It's like arguing about water at this point. I don't know. It's like, yeah, it's here.
Drinking this one.
Oh, Liquid Death. Oh, that's a fascinating company. I think
I
they
love these
weren't
guys.
they IPOing or didn't they IPO?
I think that they were talking about it. I love this. I mean, the marketing around it and the whole premise
What do
behind
you
it.
like about Liquid Death? So for the audience, this is audio, but he's holding up a can of Liquid Death water. So
I got to be honest. Like, I definitely bought in because of the marketing. I generally like sparkling water. I'm more of a Pellegrino person, but like
Mm.
when I saw the can one day, I definitely thought it was a beer, and I looked at it and I was like, oh, it's water. And I like sparkling water. Never seen it before. I said I'm the type of person that like if I see something new, I'm probably gonna try it just because I have no idea what it is. So yeah, I bought it one day and I said, oh, it's not bad. And then when I started seeing their marketing and kind of understanding the paradigm, I was like, oh, okay, this is I want to support them. I like what they do. I like
Yeah.
what they believe in. Um,
I noticed that all the comedians are using them on stage.
are they interesting?
Yeah. Uh huh. Yeah, like a number of comedians. I mean, so in my spare time, I actually don't. I read and watch a lot of and listen to a lot of data stuff, but I also have a soft spot for stand up comedy. So yeah, I noticed that. Yeah, the on stage stuff on social media, like yeah, Liquid Death's everywhere right now. So I don't know if
Oh,
they
yeah.
sponsor comedians or whatever, but
It wouldn't surprise me. I mean, in some of their marketing, I really like where in this it just brings social media. We started talking about social media earlier. Like makes it so real that there's people on Twitter that are like, I hate Liquid Death. I'd rather do X than Liquid Death. And then Liquid Death sees these tweets and like, challenge accepted. Please come to our facility and do whatever you just said.
hmm
Uh so one of them was, I think, like licking a sweaty dude, like a large sweaty
that's
guy,
funny as hell.
and they made this guy like run on a treadmill or something, and then they blindfolded these people and they said, okay, drink this or you can do this. And there was one or two people that were like, there's no way I'm licking that dude. But it's great, but the things resonate. Like
Oh, that's
I'll
funny.
talk about Big Eye made that video about data quality and with their dumpster that was on fire, and I was dying watching that. And I'm like, it's we've said it time and again, like I don't think anybody's gotten this right. Like we're all just kind of fighting the same fires, so it's like a dumpster fire just resonates with everybody.
hmm Yeah, but meanwhile, kind of bringing it back to what we were talking about earlier, it's like the divide, right? It's the data governance people will be looking at it through their lens, and the engineers will be looking at it through their lens, and it's hard to come together to fight that fire, right? Because you all have different ways
Totally.
of putting out fires,
Yep.
or not just putting out fires, I would say, but like adding to the fire, like more like pouring gasoline on it in some ways too. So
Yeah, or some people just bring in another dumpster and they're like, oh yeah, just put some of the fire over here, and we
right,
have
that's
yeah.
that's another vendor, right? So no, it's true though, and it's definitely a good mental image, and like I think that's kind of where we are. We have dumpster fires everywhere. Maybe I'll put that in the show notes here for the title.
Yeah. I like I can't wait till we have like, and I don't know if one of these big, the of course the dueling conferences that exist out there between Snowflake and Databricks, but like I, I'm I'm really interested to see a conference. Like I implore Ethan Aaron to do this as a low key thing, but like that bridges the gap. I mean, between
Mm.
the governance, policy, CDO style top down people and the engineers. Like, let's do a conference together where, I mean, maybe Joe, maybe this is your opportunity. Like, let's talk
Yeah.
about data modeling in the middle, right? Like, isn't that the great overlap to some degree? Like modeling, policy, contracts, quality, right? Like,
I mean, I would love to see a conference like that where you sort of bridge all the gaps, right? Yeah, I mean, speaking at a Steve Hoberman's data modeling conference early next year, right? But that's a data modeling zone. That's what it is. But yeah, all these tribes, if you could get everyone to come together, I think that'd be fantastic, right? And and as much as possible, leave the vendors out. So it keeps it a lot cleaner in that regard. But you got to
yep,
figure out how you're going to pay for it. I guess 'cause conferences are like notoriously expensive. But and what Ethan did a really good thing with the his happy hour in Vegas that the him and a few other companies had helped with, and
yep.
I think that was like 700 people almost.
Yeah, he said it was a big number. He's supposed. I saw a whisper of something that's going to happen in New York City, which I'm
Mm,
very very excited about and
that'd be
pray
sick.
that we get. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um.
I mean, I hope something like that happens. I mean, I was thinking about the idea of doing a kind of a vendor agnostic data engineering conference, sort of like what they do with Data Eng Bytes down in Australia,
Yeah.
or maybe that bringing that here. But I think a big event in New York would also be dope. Yeah, because I mean, next year, what is it? Databricks and Snowflake, they're in San Francisco, kind of back to back. But I think San Francisco, no offense to San Francisco, great city. sometimes. But I just think it's compared to Vegas, it's just not as good of a conference spot. Vegas is like meant for conferences.
It's built for it.
It's built
Yeah.
for it. San Francisco, you got traffic coming from SFO. San Francisco, the city itself, it's certainly seen better days. It's but that's where they chose. So that's where it's happening.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, if I could buy stock in San Francisco hotels, I mean, like that, it's probably already priced in. But like that, those guys, I hope they're making money hand over fist. I mean, like I assume they are.
yeah. I mean, Marriott and Hilton, just go buy in all those.
Just
They own everyone at this point,
Just-
or the Moscone Center, right? If that's somehow tradable, but
yeah,
um, I know these conferences are insanely expensive. I heard a number from one person, one of the big companies, about the price of the conference, and I was like, I was floored. It's like, are you sure there's are you missing
yeah,
a,
extra
is
zero.
was that extra zero that was supposed to be there? It's like, oh no, it's the number. It's like, holy crap. I'm not going to give the number. It was, but it was a lot. It was a lot,
It's a lot. Yeah.
a lot.
And especially for like little companies like us, it's like, do we, put a sizable budget together to send one or two people to go schmooze, pretty much, like, and like, let alone have a booth? Like, I would love to do that, but between hotels and being at the conference and everything else, like, everything just gets jacked up. It's like, it's wild.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I do, I don't really get conference passes unless I'm given conference passes because I don't think that it's a good use of my time. But what I will do is, set up a lot of meetings with people, and we'll just meet on the periphery and hang out and meet. Like Vegas for me is like not that far. It's 45-minute, 50-minute flight from Salt Lake
Oh, wow.
City, so it's like, yeah, and San Francisco is what, like an hour, 20 minutes, so not that big of a deal. At this point, I know enough people where it's easy to get meetings. But if you don't know a lot of people, I guess it's, you're gonna have to figure out what the ROI is on that, because these booths are not cheap,
No.
and tens of thousands of dollars. And is that better spent, focusing on your product and content and social media and everything like that? I would probably argue to some extent, yeah. I mean, because a lot of the booths in these conference spaces are just, you get a lot of tire kickers, right? But you're trying to find qualified leads too, and that's, I think your efforts could be better spent. But what do I know? I don't do conferences. I'm not the person at the booth. So
yeah, I mean, there's definitely, like, I'd be curious to see numbers around, like, call it ROI for some of these big conferences, right? Like how many actual qualified leads are any of these people getting per dollar spent on their booth and hotels and so on?
It's a good question. It's a good question.
I'm sure Snowflake and Databricks don't want to answer that. I'd love if they did.
Yeah. I don't think they're going to be answering that, but it's a question that I think every company is going to have to answer for themselves. Especially with kind of the funding environment where it is, it's not going to be easy to. I mean, every penny's precious at this point. As I sit here looking at let's say old Indian wheat head penny here on my desk for some reason. Found it in my garage. I was like, why is that here?
What's the date on it?
It is 1956.
Huh? It's still pretty good.
Yeah, not bad. Cool. Well, then we're coming up in time. My dog's actually bugging me to go take her for a walk, so I gotta get going. But yeah, man, it's always good to talk to you. Yeah, really, really fun chat. So for people who want to learn more about you, how can they find you?
Well, we started this conversation on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is the place they can find me and learn more about me. I'm actually pretty, as long as you don't send me inbound cold sales pitch, I'm pretty conversant. Like, and
yeah, do it on the third message to him, not the first.
Yeah. Third or fourth. Yeah, because that way at least we can say hi before I disconnect from you.
Yeah.
So, I think the worst one I ever had is someone sent me an inbound one, and then when I actually bought into it, and I said, sure, I'll learn more about it, they sent me a video, and I was like, no, okay, this is way too far. I was like,
wow.
At least wanted to have a conversation, and you punted me to a video to watch about your thing. I'm like, that's a hard no for me. So yeah, LinkedIn.
LinkedIn's good.
Yeah. And then our company's called automatedData.io.
Nice.
Yeah. Wonderful name for a very specific thing that we're doing. But yeah, no, it's cool. I like startups and I like the data community. I'm very thankful for, frankly, like what you guys are all doing, because I don't know. Like I said, I like talking shop, like, and being able to like kind of converse with other people about the problems that we're all facing. yeah, it's helpful.
It's like one big therapy group.
Yeah, yeah. Except we need to stop, wallowing and do more of the okay. Now I'm done. But now what? Now what's next? How do we solve these things?
I agree. Yeah, it's I think I don't know, keep rehashing a lot of the same stuff, and I keep rehashing that we keep rehashing a bunch of the same stuff. So there's that. But yeah, it should be fun, man. Well, cool. I hope you have a great time. In the city. I know you get there every week, so hopefully you can make it to Ethan's thing. But yeah, hopefully catch up with you whenever I'm in New York as well. So it'd be
Yeah,
great to hang out.
yeah,
So awesome, man.
definitely.
Well, thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.